Beck and welcome to a spoiler recap of all of the books in the Shades of Magic trilogy. I'm going to start with A Darker Shade of Magic, then into Gathering of Shadows, and then I'll talk about A Conjuring of Light. Firstly, Kell is introduced, who is Red London's Antari, and he has a run-in with Lila Bard, and she is a thief from Grey London. Prince Maresh is Prince of Red London. His parents are Maxim and Amira, both king and queen, and Kell is effectively like Rye's adopted brother. Also, Kell doesn't have any understanding of who his family are or were. The inciting action of this book is when Kell is in Grey London and he has a black stone called Vitari, and it is a magical item from Black London, and Kell accidentally ends up with this stone as a plot from the royal line of White London, and Leela doesn't know what this stone is, and so when Kell is traversing between worlds, she ends up pickpocketing him and stealing it from him, and that's how the two meet. The rulers of White London, Astrid and Athelstane, want this stone because they want its power and they want to rule over all of the Londons. And they have Holland, who is also an Antari, and they rule over him because they have like mind control powers, and so they force him to do their bidding, and so they send Holland after Kell and Lila. It's also worth mentioning that Kell is that quintessentially broody character. Even though he's in his early 20s, you'd think he was a 15-year-old by how much angst he has. He doesn't know anything about his past, like I mentioned. All he has is a handkerchief and a knife with the initials K and L on it, and that's where his name Kell came from. The reason Black London also was sealed off was because a magical plague broke loose, and so all of the other Londons, instead of helping out, they cut themselves off in order to survive. I don't know how significant this tidbit of information will be either, but Tyrion, who is a priest in Red London, he helped raise Rye and Kell, and he gifted Kell a book full of runes, and all of these runes are Antari runes from the old blood magics. So you don't really know where he got this from or what his connections to possibly knowing the history of the Antari are. Tyrion is discussed as a peripheral character throughout the trilogy, but I feel like he's got more understanding of Kell's past than he's letting on, and he potentially might be talked about in the sequel to this trilogy, but I'm not sure. There is also a key place in each London that is a tavern, and that tavern doesn't change location. So because it's a focal point, Kell often goes there to unwind after he's had all of his inter-London escapades, I suppose, and the tavern is generally called the Stone's Throw, and Leela was almost raised by Baron, who owns a version of the Stone's Throw in Grey London. At the end of book 1, Prince Rye, who can't really do magic, whereas Kell is super magically gifted, he's always comparing himself to Kell, and in a moment of weakness, he accepts this necklace from Holland, the Antari from White London, who's obviously doing the bidding of the royals there, and this necklace makes Rye lose his sense of self and allows Astrid Dane to take control of him. Rye accepts the necklace because it promised power and magic, and he didn't have any, and so because of this moment of weakness, it allowed Astrid Dane to take control of him and turn him against his friends. While Rye is under the control of the necklace, he ends up taunting Kell and Lila and trying to get Vitari, the stone, from them, but when that doesn't really work, he ends up, while he's possessed, stabbing himself and dying. In his desperation and grief, Kell grabs Rye and magically uses the stone to bind Rye's life force to him so that Rye doesn't end up completely dying. He gets brought back to life, but now he and Kell are tethered together, and they have a tattoo over both of their hearts to show that they are bound. After Kell effectively saves Prince Rye's life, he and Lila go to White London and they confront the Danes. They end up killing them, and then Leela is shown to have a glass eye, which is like very strong foreshadowing. And then the book just ends with Kell going back to Red London and Lila spying a pirate ship that she wants to set sail on. Then we've got A Gathering of Shadows, which is book 2, and that picks up 4 months after the events of the first book. Kell is still in Red London, and he's seeing Lila in every shadow, and he can't shake her from his head. Lila, meanwhile, is having a blast adventuring with Alucard. She, through a ploy, managed to get on board Alucard, Emery's ship, and he is the captain of the Night Spire, and through her gradual building of trust with Alucard, he is now starting to teach her magic. Holland, after the events of book 1, after just surviving the battle with Kell, he was stabbed and then sent to Black London with Vitari the Stone. Because he's sent back here, he makes this deal with a statue that he comes across so that he doesn't end up dying, but that deal is with Osron, who is the cause of the magical plague across Black London. And Osron is just magic that has brought on its own sense of will, and it just is all-consuming and it wants power. While Leela and Alucard are building their understanding of magic and building up their trust as characters together, there is also the Essen Tash, which is a magical tournament that's announced, and it's for all of the neighbouring kingdoms to come together and compete with each other in a friendly bout so that there is a winner crowned and all of the political alliances are supported. It's kind of a ploy, or not a ploy, but an event held in Red London that moves every time the event is held every couple of years in order to kind of strengthen those relationships between cities and countries. To show loyalty to the crown, a lot of different nobles are invited to compete in these trials, and Alucard is actually Alucard Emery, and Emery is a noble house, and so Alucard has been invited to go to this Essentage, this magical trial, because they're going back to Red London. Inevitably, Lila was going to go back to Red London and run into Kell again, so she ends up faking her way into the contest and testing her mettle with her magic. And Kell and Prince Rai, because they are bonded and experiencing, I guess, grief and isolation and frustration and loneliness, they are having everything enhanced through this bond, and Kell really needs an outlet for that. So even though Rai feels every physical moment of pain that Kell experiences, he encourages and gets Kell into the contest under a fake identity. And so Kell and Lila are competing, not knowing each other are competing, and Alucard is competing because he was invited to compete. The Essentage really only lasted the last couple of chapters, and it ended really quickly too, and Alucard ended up winning. The focus mostly for this book was Oseron and how he is slowly starting to take over. The magical bond, like I said, is enhancing Rai's depression to the point where he's actually physically self-harmed a couple of times, and also it's increasing Kell's sense of being caged and his isolation. So that is ultimately why Rai let him compete, even though it's physically harming Rai to do so. Kell also feels additionally caged because he feels like the king and queen only care about him because of his connection to Rai and not because he's their adopted son. At the end of book 2, we're shown Ojka, and she is an Antari from White London, and it's not entirely clear whether Oseron found her or created her. I think he created her, and she's been doing all of Holland's bidding so far, and she ends up giving Kell a choice to leave everyone that he knows because he already feels isolated, and so he willingly goes with her because he feels like he hasn't had a lot of choices so far. It's just him being brooding, and he ends up going with Ojka, and then Ojka helps Holland trap him, and Kell is tortured by Oseron so that he will eventually say yes to Oseron possessing him, because Oseron needs somebody to say yes, but he often gets into their head with magic and convinces them anyway through trickery. When Kell is captured, obviously when he's being tortured, Rai is also feeling the same thing because of their bond, so when Rai collapses howling in pain, Alucard panics, and Lila is determined to go after Kell to a different London, even though she's not been able to travel without him before. And then that's the end of book 2. It ends on a cliffhanger. Because of the foreshadowing that happened in books 1 and 2, we obviously know that Lila is an Antari, so naturally in book 3 she manages to get to White London to help Kell on her own. As a torture device, a collar was placed around Kell's neck, and this cut off all his magic, and because it cut off the magic, it meant that it cut the bond off to Rai, so Rai ended up dying in Red London. Alucard is mourning, his parents are mourning, and so Lila is panicking as well because she thinks that Kell has died, but obviously they don't die. Lila also manages, in finding Kell, to also kill Ojka and then free Kell and escape. I don't know where Oseron was in all this time. Some of this book just feels really convenient at times. When Kell comes back to Red London and they get the collar off him, this also means that Rai revives and returns back to life again because the bond can now be reconnected. And Alucard, in all of this panic, realizes the extent of the feelings that he still has for Prince Rai. I'm pretty sure this will be important for later as well, but it's also mentioned that Alucard can actually see the threads of power that bind people's magic to things, and so because he can see them, he can see how Oseron's magic really knots into somebody and infects them and changes them. But it's also worth noting that Lila can't see them, neither can Kell, but Lila can feel magic in the air. Oseron follows Kell and Lila back into Red London, and he decides that he wants to take over Red London because it's the most magic infused of the Londons, and he shows himself as a corporeal form because Holland made a deal with him. Holland was like, if I can get you Kell, then you need to release my body, and obviously that didn't work. So now Oseron's trying to get Kell's body himself. And so he comes to Red London, dissolves himself into the River Thames, which used to be red but is now black because of the corruption, and he starts sacking the city. However, Antari blood stops Oseron's power, so people who Kell and Lila managed to get to in time, they put blood on their forehead and that stops the magic from corrupting them, but there's a whole city of people, so naturally they're not going to be able to save nearly enough. The rest of the city folk are either killed or they are taken over by Oseron's possession. So naturally Alucard is like, this is a great time to leave the palace, and he gets the blood on his forehead from the Antari, and then he goes and he tries to to find his family to see if they are still alive. And while he is trying to find out if they are still alive, Alucard finds his brother and also his sister, and his brother is fully infected, but his sister doesn't seem to be showing signs that she is, like she's fighting it. So he takes her away onto a ship. While he's hiding on this ship, she ends up turning. Rye ends up worried about Alucard and leaving the safety of the palace as well. And while he's out looking for Alucard, he realizes that because he shares a bond with Kell, all of Ozeron's magic is repelled from him. So he finds Alucard, and Alucard realizes that his sister has died, and now he's infected by Ozeron's magic as well. And Rye waits with Alucard while Alucard gets infected, and then Alucard fights off the magical illness. And after Ozeron's corruption rolls off him, he's got like this silver shininess to him that shows that he didn't get corrupted. It turns out that Rye is calling all of these people that survived, like Alucard, Silvers. They are small in number, but they are all scared and they can't fight off all of the hordes of corrupted by themselves. So Rye takes it upon himself to go out into the city and locate and save all of these Silvers and bring them back to the palace. But while he's doing this, the other characters decide to go on this several-day quest to get a magical item that will eventually, when they come back, hopefully trap Ozeron and then stop him from sacking the city and continuing his death and corruption. While all this has been going on, Holland was also captured and put prisoner in Red London's jails, but Holland is one of the characters that go on this quest because Kell brings him along with them. So it's Holland, Kell, Lila, and Alucard, and they all go together. Before this quest, Holland suggests that for his crimes, he is publicly executed, but he and Kell hatch their own plan within that, where Ozeron will hopefully try and possess Holland, and while he's possessing Holland, Kell has to try and kill Ozeron because Ozeron doesn't have a corporeal body. So as soon as he possesses someone, theoretically you'd be able to kill him. But Ozeron sees through that whole thing, and Kell and Holland are thrown into the Thames. Both of them almost drown. Ultimately they survive, and then everyone's like, we need to go on a quest instead and try and kill Ozeron in a different way. The map that Alucard uses to read where this secret item on a black market is located is Lila stole a map initially, I think from book 1 or something, and has kept it since. And because she kept this map, it was actually a secret map that pirates use in order to locate where this black market will eventually be. So she's like, I've got this map, and Alucard reads it because she doesn't know how to read it, and that's how they find out where the black market will be. And Alucard remembers this magical box called the Inheritor, and he sold it several years ago to this pirate at the market. So they're like, well, we need to go back to the market and try and locate the Inheritor because the Inheritor will stop Ozeron. This quest lasts 5 days, and while they are gone for those 5 days, all hell breaks loose at the castle. So there is a political plot between the Vescan prince and princess, and they decide to kill both the king and the queen, but Rye is with Queen Amira when she's stabbed, and he stands in front of the blade, and the blade just goes through him, and he thinks that he's saved his mother by taking the knife instead, but it's gone through him and into her. So Queen Amira dies, and then also King Maxim has been hatching his own plan to kind of kill Ozeron, maybe, and he confronts Ozeron with all of these minion things, I guess, made of steel. He used to be the Steel Prince. He tries to confront Ozeron, doesn't work, and Ozeron kills him as well. Rye tried to also help his father and stop him from going out to confront Ozeron, but Solinar, one of the nobles that was invited from a different kingdom, holds Rye back and makes sure he doesn't leave. The ship that everyone uses to go to the black market is called Ghost, and the pirate owner of the black market is called Maris, and Maris actually recognizes Kell because she knew his parents. She tries to trick Kell into making different deals with her because she knows what the K and the L stand for in his initials, but he refuses, and he ends up walking away from the market with some binding rings. These binding rings allow Kell, Holland, and Lila to share powers between each other because they are specifically used for Antari. The group also realize that the device that they want is around Maris's neck, and Lila's like, I'm the thief, it's alright, I'll do this play, and she works out how to get this Inheritor from Maris, but at the same time Maris goes, do you want this black Antari eye? It used to be worn by all of the Antari back in the day, but now they've kind of faded out. And Lila accepts, but also doesn't have anything to pay Maris with. And the bargain they strike means that Lila owes Maris a favor in future. And that favor is never called upon in this book, so I imagine it will be called upon in future. Now all these characters are trying to return to Red London to fight Ozeron with their Inheritor. There is a coup on the ship. The captain, Jasta, she was actually working for Solinar, and Solinar wanted her to kill Kel. So while she tries to kill Kel, Hastra, one of Kel's guards, takes the knife intended for him, and Hastra dies. Shortly after Hastra dies, Lila stabs Jastra and kills her off. Kel, Lila, Alucard, and Holland take over the ship, and Alucard used to be a captain of the Night Spire, so he just takes over as captain and gets them back to Red London. Unfortunately, they are moments too late to get back to Red London because Rye has decided that he needs to confront Ozeron, which makes so much sense given that that's exactly what his father did, and then his father died. Anyway, he goes to confront Ozeron and try and buy the other characters time before they get back to Red London because they gave him a deadline of 5 days and they're a little bit late. I don't know why he didn't just wait in the safety of the castle, but anyway, he went to confront Ozeron by himself and was captured and tortured, and Kel feels the physical torture and knows that Rye is in danger. For some reason, V.E. Schwab thought the resurrection trope was a great idea because Ozeron realizes that Ojka is part of him, and so he resurrects her, which makes so much sense, and he becomes her and takes over her body. So I don't know why he couldn't have just done this earlier in the book and it had to be for the finale. But anyway, now the crew are fighting against Ojka, which is actually Ozeron, and trying to trap her in the Inheritor. There is an ending battle. Holland takes the brunt of it, but effectively they trap Ozeron, Ojka, in the Inheritor, and they win. At the end of book 3, Holland wakes up in the Marash Palace and he realizes that he's lost his Antari bonds. He doesn't have that magic anymore. His hair is white as if corrupted by magic and then dispelled. He's got both green eyes now instead of just one green eye and one black Antari eye. So that's effectively his fate, suffered from the binding rings being overwhelmed by magic and sealing Ozeron in the Inheritor. Kel also has after effects of using the binding rings against Ozeron as well, because now whenever he uses magic, it gives him a physical pain. Again, in order to let Holland die, which seems to be the running theme throughout this book, Kel transports Holland back to White London, where Holland is from, and while he's saying goodbye, Kel leaves a Red London Lin, which to me suggests that he's got a token of Red London, which means that Holland is probably not going to die and actually transport back to Red London in whatever sequel to warn them that Ozeron isn't dead. Because they just trapped him, they didn't kill him, they trapped him in the Inheritor and then hid him away. Alucard is also stripped of his privateer title and is not a pirate captain anymore. He's also stripped of the Night Spire. He ends up rekindling his relationship with Rye, and he's also Rye's personal guard. Alucard also shows this magical mirror that he acquired at the black market. That was his thing that he brought back with him. He shows Rye why he disappeared several years ago in their relationship when they were both very seriously in love with each other. It wasn't actually his fault. He was captured and beaten and sent away by his brother and his father. And I don't know why he had to get a magical mirror to show that to Rye. Wouldn't he just be able to tell him and Rye believe him? Anyway, Alucard discards his title of Emery, so he's not linked to that noble house anymore, and leaves it to his brother Varys. Lila gets what she's always wanted, which is her own pirate ship. She inherits the Night Spire, which was Alucard's ship, and now she and Kel go off on the ocean adventuring together, which is what Kel has always wanted to be able to do. And this is why I thought that Lila and Alucard had better chemistry than Lila and Kel, because Lila actually sticks around and says goodbye to Alucard rather than just disappearing. Before this conclusion though, before they set sail, it's shown that Lila and Kel both visit Ned in Grey London, and Ned owns one of those taverns that we talked about before, except it's not called the Stone's Throw anymore. His tavern is called the 5 Points, and it's also mentioned that magic seems to be more pervasive. It's coming back now, whereas in Grey London it barely existed before, because just before Kel and Lila appear, Ned gets spooked by the sound of them arriving and he accidentally extinguishes all of the candles around him. This is where Kel and Lila entrust the Inheritor with Ozeron trapped inside it, and they bury him in the basement of the 5 Points Tavern. He was trapped in stone before and that didn't seem to stop him though. While also in Grey London, Kel serves his final duty by giving the last letter to King George. He used to traverse the Londons to pass letters between royalty, and it was kind of a moot point. They didn't really go anywhere. They were just very bland updates about what was going on in each London. But King George is obsessed with Antari and obsessed with magic, and I think that's a bit of a red flag, because King George had this massive letter for the royalty in Red London and Kel's like, we're done communicating, so something's gonna brew there surely. And then we finish A Conjuring of Light with two things. The first is Prince Rye saying that 65 years of peace between the kingdoms have been ruined because of the ploy and the succeeding act of killing his mother, the queen. So now blood has been drawn, there is going to inevitably be war. And the second thing is Holland is apparently taking his last breath, but while he is doing that, the last thing he really thinks about, or that we're shown that he's thought about, is that he thinks he hears the king is coming, which is what everyone was hearing when they were thinking about Ozeron, and Ozeron was gathering power. But that is how the trilogy ends. So if you watch this video all the way to the end, do let me know down below in the comments. So thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.